is Melissa Miller. I am well, I'll get to that in a second, but I'm here to talk about building a comprehensive design system, so one that reaches beyond a Drupal site, if that's even necessary, because it might not be, and then how to get started. So most of us who have worked in the Drupal front end are familiar with the concept of embedding a design system or a component library in the theme. Show of hands, like something with Pattern Lab or Storybook, something like that. So I'm going to talk, a little bit about that and why you would want to stay there in some cases and why you would want to move beyond in other cases. And I'll just kind of present a comprehensive framework, like a checklist of some things you should do when planning a design system. So a little bit about me. So I'm principal UX engineer at Pantheon. I previously worked in higher ed for almost 20 years. Longtime Drupal user. I live here in Oakland, but I'm originally from the Midwest. And I love dogs, music, urban history. You can learn more at my website, but you really don't have to learn more about me. But if you want to contact me, my contact info is on that website. And that's my little dog, Simon. So I want to talk briefly, and let me know if I'm talking too fast because we lost some time. So I'm going to try to get through everything. But yeah, if I need to talk louder or slower, just raise your hand. I'm happy to do that. But I want to talk about my design system origin story. So I started working on design systems probably about 2013-ish. I started by embedding Pattern Lab into Drupal themes, and then I started by moving Pattern Lab outside of Drupal themes and importing it back in. And then around 2019, I was co-creator of the university design system at Ohio State University. It was me and another colleague from another department. We started this grassroots initiative to do a comprehensive design system. And this is where we took it outside of Drupal. Our university was heavily Drupal, but we wanted it to be for everyone, so we basically kind of took it up a level. And so it was a more comprehensive design system with heavy documentation, styles. We hosted via CDN, so you could import that back in. And then we encouraged our colleagues around the university who were using other technologies to contribute back to the system their own toolkits that can consume it. And then I left that work in 2022 to come work at Pantheon because I had an opportunity to work on design systems full time. Prior to that, it was just kind of like my little side gig at OSU. I was actually the director for web and design in one of the units. And I found myself gravitating towards design systems and wanting to do more hands-on work. So that's why I left. I've been at Pantheon ever since. But I had this epiphany a couple years ago that 2013 is not when I started working on design systems. I started working on design system in the 90s. When I was early in my career, I was a graphic designer. I did desktop publishing for publications, for packaging, the packaging industry. This is an actual computer. This is the Macintosh SE. This is what I learned on in high school, in the very early 90s. And so I'm thinking about, I had this epiphany. I'm like, oh, I've always been doing design systems, in a way, even if it wasn't called that. And so I kind of consider that my origin story. And I learned 3 things from there that I carry to this day. So make everything dry, don't repeat yourself. Consistency. And then the big one is make it easy for others to follow the rules and implement your styles. You don't want to fight against them. You want to make it easy for them to do that. Okay, so moving on. So what is a design system? I'm going to show you a definition of what it is in its simplest form. This is the most simple definition. A set of guidelines, styles, and building blocks to manage design at scale. You can elaborate on that a little bit. But there's some confusion out there, or if someone has a component library, they may call it a design system. It's not really a design system. I'm not here to be the language police, so as long as you state what your system does, it's fine, whatever you call it. But I want to talk about more of a true comprehensive design system today, and the other stuff. But so what are the benefits of a design system? There's tons of them. I don't have time to go into all, but they kind of all fall under one of 3 pillars, in my opinion. So it's consistency. So you want consistency for your end users, your consistent user experience, consistent branding, visual identity, and in the code. Efficiency. It lets your designers and your developers build things quickly and not have to recreate the wheel. It lets them think about more complex problems than how to slap stuff together. So it helps them there. The third one is accessibility. This one, a design system can definitely help with accessibility, but it's not going to get you all the way there. Don't think, if you have an accessible design system, then your application or your website's accessible. It gets you started, but there's still a lot more to do in that realm, but I do feel like it is an important part of this. Okay, so a design system is comprehensive. And what I mean by that is a traditional, like a design system in the sense, if you kind of step outside the Drupal world for a minute, like the design system is a comprehensive system. The component library is just one part of it. So most design systems, I put a little picture of Primer there, the GitHub, that's one of my favorite ones, at least in terms of the same type of content that we might need at Pantheon. I try to use that as a guide sometimes. But basically they have typically a documentation website, there's a design library, which is your Figma file, there's brand guidelines, there's usage guidelines, design tokens, and then technology-specific toolkits, whether that be, React, plain HTML, Drupal, iOS. You could have these different toolkits that are expressions of your design system. They're implementations. So back to the original question and the title of this, do all embedded design systems need to move beyond the site or just being embedded in the site? The short answer is no, not necessarily. So I'm going to do like a little flow chart here. So should I decouple my design system? The first question you ask is, do I have more than one site now or in the future, near future? And if you said no, well, do you also need to style like third-party integrations? If again your answer is no, then no need. You could definitely keep your component library right in your theme. Like there's no need unless you want to. But if you were to answer yes, then we kind of go to a maybe. Like, what's the level of effort? Like, are you branding like a whole other store or a whole other third-party app? Then maybe. Or if it's just like a little plugin you need to style, you probably don't need to waste your time building a whole design system. You could just style that. So then if we go back to the first question, yes, are the additional sites built with Drupal? If you say yes, well then maybe. Maybe at minimum you kind of want to move your theme out to its own repo and pull it back into different Drupal sites, or maybe you have a distribution that you have this theme in with it. So that's kind of a maybe, but the big yes, and the kind of the use case I'm going to talk about a little bit is if you have other technologies, if you're also building a React app or a Vue or an iOS, you probably want to go up a level and start thinking about a design system. And then it could grow as you grow. And so you would have the same the core values, the tokens, the style library, like the design library, all that will be the same, and then it starts to tree out when you get to like the individual technologies. Okay, so that's my little flow chart. So where to begin? So I'm going to say documentation. I'm only kind of half joking here. If you have the luxury or the time to do documentation before you start building anything, I highly recommend it, because you're gonna run into like inconsistencies, things you haven't thought of. You might name things and then decide it has a different, better name later. So I recommend, even if you can't build out all the documentation, to at least compile a list of the components you want to build, or the layouts, the styles, which we're going to get to. I'm going to present a checklist for that. So how about a checklist? Grab my water real quick. So we're going to kind of walk through the checklist. I'm going to keep an eye on time. And I'm going to basically, this is not going to be an exhaustive checklist. This is going to basically give you an example of what type of decisions you want to make before you start building your design system. And the items in this checklist, not all, but majority of the items in the checklist also pertain to if you're going to keep your design system or your component library within your site. Some of the bigger picture ones are about a comprehensive design system, but some of the details will get you going anywhere. And one more thing, I'm going to kind of address the elephant in the room. I'm not going to talk about AI today. Like it seems like every other talk is talking about AI. But if you happen to be, I'm not against it, and I actually use it to build components sometimes, but I haven't had time to like delve into it and use it in a novel way that makes sense for a design system. But I do use it for some coding. And but what I wanted to say, for those of you who are very heavily into AI or plan on building your system with the help of AI, a lot of these questions that you need to answer are still relevant as well. Okay, so the first item is, What is your scope? Who's your users? Who owns the system? Is it you? Are you as a single person? Is it a team? What is your governance model? That means like if someone wants to add a component or change a component, how does that work? And so you should probably write all this stuff out ahead of time. And then this is the big one. Where are you drawing the line between what the system provides and what should be built within the application? And so in our case, that's the Drupal site. So like, are you just doing like very, foundational styles, a few atomic level components, and then everything else gets assembled in the theme? Or are you building like these very structured components and patterns that you kind of just drop in the theme? And it really kind of depends on your team makeup on either side of the situation. And sometimes you're both. Sometimes you're both people. Like you're the Drupal themer and the design system person. And again, I will have some opinions that are probably going to sneak out as we go through these, but these are meant to be like objective questions that you ask yourself as you're planning a system. Okay, so the next one is content categorization. How are you organizing and presenting your content? Should you use atomic design? What about a more pragmatic approach? Here's where one of the opinions comes out. I'm gonna say don't use atomic design. I think you shouldn't present content as atomic design. You should definitely plan that way, design that way, have components build upon each other. But when you're presenting to your end user, I feel like it should be more pragmatic, more categorical based on the needs. If you look at any major design systems like GitHub Primer, Atlassian, Salesforce, like you'll see it organized in a more pragmatic way. There'll be like foundations components or like primitives components, stuff like that. So that's just my personal recommendation. But if you're already doing atomic and it works for you, go for it. But these are the questions you need to answer ahead of time. Okay. Supported technologies. Is there an associated Figma library? If I was asking this question 10 years ago, it might have been, is there an associated Sketch library or something? But whatever you need to do to keep you in sync with your designers. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit at the end, like a recommendation for that. Are you using design tokens? And we'll talk about that more at the end, so I'm just going to gloss over that for now. Are you supporting Drupal? Do you have other frameworks? Have you considered web components? So if you have a couple different frameworks, maybe you want to use web components instead. Do you also need a basic HTML version? And then my last question is, in reference to the question before, can any of those redundancies be combined? So if you have to build a Drupal one and a React one, I'm going to use that as an example because that's my actual use case. Do you want to have a base level core styles that get disseminated into those separate toolkits? You don't want to like recreate everything in both toolkits, which is exactly what I'm doing now. But this very simple architecture diagram shows where I'm headed. So I'm gonna basically, I don't know, can you see colors up there? Yeah. Okay, so anything in a blue bubble is basically a toolkit, or it's a repository with an NPM package. And these aren't all done yet. This is my future, what I'm doing in the next 6 months. But the top part, the design tokens and all the stuff on the left, that is happening now. So the core of my system starts with design tokens. That's where we define everything, like the core values for colors, animation, border weight, text, fonts, all that kind of stuff. Those are defined there. It gets then branched out to Figma to be added to the Figma component library, which our designers use to compose experiences. And then the NPM package then gets pulled into our toolkits. And so right now, we kind of go from the design tokens, and then we have a React toolkit, and we have like an older Drupal toolkit. What I'm suggesting is what I'm planning to do is introduce this middle layer where we abstract the icons out and then have a PDS core, which is just basic styles and utility classes. Then that gets ported into each of the content-specific toolkits or the framework-specific. Again, this diagram works for my situation, but yours might be more complex or less complex. It's just an example. Okay. So determine how tools are built and distributed. So the design library is an easy one. It can be just published from Figma as a library. But for the code-based stuff, how will you build the toolkits? And so for the Drupal side, are you going to build a Drupal toolkit, or are you going to actually build a base theme? It really depends on your team makeup and your situation. For either case, for if you're doing React or the Drupal theme or whatever, are you going to use Storybook to preview? So think about that. Do you want a preview experience within your application? And then how will you distribute the toolkits? So I'm going to throw an opinion in here as well. I'd say NPM should kind of be your default for front-end type stuff. But if you're actually building a Drupal theme, you might want to consider Composer as the distribution method. And if you're doing like plain HTML, vanilla JavaScript, you might want to consider a CDN. And then so if you have third-party applications to style, you could just reference that style sheet instead of having to build everything locally. Okay. So determine how your system will be documented. Number one rule, make sure it's easy for users to follow your rules. You don't want resistance, you want friends, and you want to make it easy for them. So I'm just going to kind of gloss over this one, but it's basically, do you want it on a website? Is it in Storybook, in your toolkit? Is it in Figma? Yeah, just kind of make those decisions up front. Next one is use consistent terminology. So this is kind of what I was talking about at the front. Like if you document everything, you kind of know. Like I've made some mistakes here. So like I have most of my components that deal with navigation are called navigation something, but I have one called menu something. And if I would have planned this all out at first, I would have named them all consistently. So these are examples where, is it a navigation or a menu? Is it a notification or a message? Is it a form field or an input? You know, those kind of things. Think of those up front. It'll save you some refactoring down the line. Or if you don't really care about all those details, then just build as you go. And then just in general, whenever there's an opportunity to name things similarly, go ahead and do that. So here's another one. Establish naming conventions. So are you going to prefix all your classes? Like our system is called Pantheon Design System, so everything's like PDS dash something. My old one at OSU is BUX dash something. You don't have to, you can. You just choose to up front. It might be helpful if there's also another framework in there that kind of didn't prefix theirs, you know, you might have some issues there, especially if you're doing global styles. And then, you know, think about, are you going to abbreviate things? Button, BTN. That one is not as critical, but this one right here is huge. Again, I gotta fix my lesson learned here. You should name like your sizes the same for everything, like all your components, all your tokens, all your, like pick a style and stick with it. So like for how you're naming small, medium, large, stuff like that. Okay, we got a couple more of these, and then we'll get into the fun recommendation part. Establish standard typography and spacing scales. So you're gonna they're already gonna exist from your designer, or you work with your designer to determine these. So you don't want to be like, oh, I guess this one should be 12 and this one should be 16. You want them consistent on a scale, and you want to be able to apply them as appropriate across the board. And so I have links of a few tools to help with that and kind of explain the thing a little bit. I'm going to share a link to the slides at the end so you can come back and grab these. And then determine the scope for your utility classes. So I would say provide only what would be useful for successful implementation. Like kind of walk that line where like it's going to help them implement it, but it's not going to let them veer too far off the path. And like we don't need to recreate Tailwind. Like that's not what we're here for. We're here to do brand styles, namely, or consistent UI. So I didn't put examples here, but like some examples that you would want to keep are like global default colors, like background default secondary, background default reverse. Have these things. Your status colors, like warning, critical info, like those should all be. You should have utility class versions of those. In terms of like, is there a background, is there borders, that kind of stuff. Font families, stuff like that. So you decide like where your personal line is. But I would recommend kind of determining that scope up front. Okay, and then this is kind of, like I said, we're going to kind of start general and get a little into the weeds. So here's the last one, and this is a little more in the weeds, but are you going to use post CSS, Sass, plain CSS? Are you using an external framework like Tailwind to build on top of? Personally, I would not, but you can, and it's okay. But just know that up front. And then, are you going to use naming conventions like them? Will you be producing a global style sheet or component-specific styles? Maybe a hybrid approach. Again, that determines how you're going to do your Drupal site. Are you doing single directory components? Are you doing just, old school theming where you have a big global style sheet? There's no right answer here. But yeah, just kind of think of that ahead of time. In React, I typically use a hybrid. So like I have a global style sheet with all the foundational things, and then each component has its CSS localized to that component. Okay, so that's our checklist. I wanted to breeze through that really quick because now I have 4 recommendations that I want to talk, some of them a little more in depth with, and then I can take questions. So recommendations to take your system to the next level. So let's look at them. So first of all, let's use Storybook. Who's familiar with Storybook? Cool. I like that. Okay, so Storybook's pretty much industry standard now. There was Pattern Lab, there was Fractal, there was others over the years. But this one, it's industry standard. I highly recommend it. You could basically build components in isolation without having to be aware of your Drupal database or running a whole application. I think it's pretty great. Most of you already seen it, but I'm gonna just run this little video here and kind of talk you through it. Here's my React Storybook instance. And there's things, basically it lets you put documentation. This part is called the canvas, where it lets you preview what the component will look like when you tweak the little arguments. This is called the args table below it. So you see that I'm about to change the name on the ARIA label, which changes the tooltip. And so when we hover over it, you see that it changed. So you kind of use this to compose your component. And then I didn't show it in the video because it doesn't work as good for Drupal, but there's this little show code button on the canvas. It works really well for React. So you can compose your settings, show code, copy that component, and you're good to go. The Drupal version is basically a hacked HTML version, so you're not going to be able to get that as well. I'm going to try to work on it though to try to finagle something, but out of the box, the React one works really well. But as you can see, these are just different stories of our component, different pre-compositions. We had an animated version of the button, which I showed there. But this is just one individual component, and if you look at the sidebar, it's all the components we have. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead. Recommendation number 2, use design tokens. Who's using design tokens? All right, cool. A lot of people will tell you not to use design tokens, or that you don't have to use them if you're just doing a Drupal site, and that is true. But if you want to do more than one technical implementation, or the big one is keep in sync with your designers and their Figma variables and their Figma styles, you should use design tokens. This is a single source of truth, and then you disseminate it out to your Figma file, any technologies that you need it, kind of like that chart I showed a few slides back. So these are like the base level global design decisions. And I'm using a tool called Style Dictionary. It's an open source framework. It's pretty much the industry standard. It's very scriptable, and it also has a lot of built-in transformations as well. But basically, you define your tokens in JSON, and then you run the script, either one out of the box or one you wrote yourself, and then it basically transforms the base value, the single source of truth, to what you need. And so in my case, I'm doing CSS custom variables, I'm doing JSON for Figma, and then I'm doing another JSON that works with, there's like a CSS tools plugin to use JSON and CSS. So I'm going to 3. When we originally did it, I also did Sass, because our website was using Sass. But yeah, if we ever do iOS, we can export those type of colors in the format they need, or those variables. Super helpful. And it enables pretty easy color mode switching. If you care about light and dark mode, design tokens will help you, and I'll show you that in a second. So there's 3 main token types that, and these aren't something that it's not like an official thing. It's not like you go into Style Dictionary and say, I'm a primitive, I'm this, These are how you should organize, and a lot of the big ones, if you look at Atlassian's design system, they'll talk a little bit about this as well. But I like to categorize these into 3 main types, and I'm going to kind of walk through each. So one of them is, the first one is the primitive. So these are a way to store the base values. These tokens are typically only inherited and not used directly in the components. These are where you set up your color ramps. So you say like you have your brand color and you have it like 100, 200, 300, 400. These are primitive tokens. You're never going to use those directly in the components, or you shouldn't because you're not going to have color mode switching. But that's where you store those. That's where you store your font families, stuff like that. So those are 2 examples. You see the examples at the bottom. They're in dot notation because that's essentially the JSON before it gets converted. And I'll show a conversion example. The second one is semantic. And these are tokens designated for a specific purpose. And most of your token usage should live here. So these are like, my first example I'll talk through is border, radius, container. So it's a border, that's the category. Radius is the property. And container is like a special designation. It's the semantic type. And so anytime you have a container, which would be like a card, a modal, a drop down, and like a menu button, like those are all container in our system, and those all get the same radius value. You'll probably have a separate one called border radius input. So any sort of inputs, like text field selects, they'll have a slightly smaller one, and it'll be a different value. So these are semantic. They're not named for value. They're named for usage. And then the third category is component specific. So this is if you need to get even more specific than the semantic styles. So these are like, maybe it only pertains to this one component, or maybe sometimes components start as component tokens, and then when you have another use case for them, they might graduate over to the semantic side. We've had a little bit of that. But how these differ are, if you look at the examples, we have container, modal, with XL. So that's basically, the word modal means it goes for the modal component. The one right below, tag, is associated with the tag component. And we have naming conventions that tell you like what to do. Do you do category, then property, then this, then that? And again, you can define those yourself. But I just wanted to give a quick example of the difference between the primitive and the semantic. So if you look at the bottom one of primitive, it's color, dark mode, neutral, 600. If you look at the semantic, it's color, dark mode, text, default. Those are going to be the exact same value in our system, because color, dark mode, text, default inherits this 600 here. And this might become more apparent when we talk about mode switching, why you would want to abstract that like that. Okay, so I'm going to give just, I don't know if we can see a little bit. Okay, so this is this first picture up here is basically how you define your tokens in JSON. So that's where you're going to see how they define, and you can see like the dot notation. So like this one would be light mode, background. I can't read, but you get it. Transparent, and then the value. But and then when we run the compilation script, we're gonna get the CSS custom properties as one of our outputs. And so if you look, it maps, the ones that are circled in green map exactly to what we've defined here. And if you notice, the notation has changed a little. So this is a light mode only style sheet, so we strip out the light mode from the name. And then it actually outputs the values as your CSS properties. So what we're doing in that particular script, like I said, it's stripping out the light mode, and it's adding the -PDS in front of it. And basically the scripts, you can customize them to do whatever you want, or however you want to end it. And then the other use case of this is here's what happens when it goes to Figma. So it goes to Figma. In this particular case, we have it going into styles in Figma. And the 2 green circled boxes on either of those images are outputs of the first image. So you can kind of see how this is nice, and this will work really well together. And nowadays, you can go into Figma variables. I'm going to have to convert over to that, but when I first set up this token system, Figma variables didn't exist. It just came out like a year and a half ago. So these are just Figma styles, but they could be variables in Figma as well, and you can do your mode switching there. Okay, so that was number 2. This is recommendation number 3, and this is a quick one. Just this one little slide here. It's Don't name design tokens and utility classes for specific values. And it kind of goes back to the primitive token thing. You can get messy. Like if you had your font, like, text font size 12, text font size 16. Well, what if you change your type scale and you want different numbers? It's just a big mess, and then you'd have to go manually update all the usages of those. So name them for semantic values, like what they do, or for numbered ones, use like t-shirt sizes, like small, large, extra large, 2X. It's so much easier if you want to make updates down the road. And then for the color ones, it's so much easier to implement dark and light mode switching, or any sort of mode, like a high contrast for accessibility or something, if you have the tokens named semantically instead of for values. Okay, the final one. All right, not the final one. I do have an image here. So this is just basically showing the same export. You could do it different in your system, but this is showing the same export for light mode and dark mode of the same variables. If you notice, I don't know if it's hard to read, but if you notice the variables are named the same exact thing, the value switches. And so, and again, I don't know if you could see, but this is giving the root. So this is the default, and it's also giving a data theme light. And so these are your light mode colors. That's giving data theme dark. And so what we're gonna do in our React application is we have a mode switcher, and it's going to grab that data theme attribute and decide whether it's going to serve these or these, and that's how you go into light or dark mode. There's other ways to do it, but that's a pretty good way to do it with design token. Okay, now we're at the last one. Provide component generators. So this is like making your devs happy, or if you're the only dev, it's making future you happy. When you do a new component, you don't want to have to copy an old one, change all the stuff, or recreate all the files from scratch. There's this really cool tool called Plop. I'm sure there's other ones out there in the world, but you could basically script scaffolding of your component files. So you can write scripts that customize each type of component. I use that in quotes because components are sometimes called other things, or in layouts or whatnot. But you can do it for each type. And I'm going to show, again, another little video. I'll kind of talk through. So I have the component generator built here, and I have a NPM script. And so I'm going to say generate component. It's going to ask me a couple questions. It's going to ask me what I want it to be called. And all the casing and the proper naming will happen afterwards. So you can just type in however you want it. And then do you want a subdirectory? And I said yes. And then what it did is it scaffolded all these files. Let me see if I can pause it here. So what it's doing is it's basically, I have all these templates. It's scaffolding the CSS, the Markdown, the test file for VRT, the stories file, which you need for Storybook, and then the actual component file in TypeScript. So this is the React version here, but you could definitely do this with the Drupal version. And it's also adding an entry in our index CSS. So we could have it in the global style sheet if you wanted to, and then it's doing your React export file for the bundle. So when people use this system, it's generating all those things and then adding to those existing files. And then as you see, I'm going to play it again. If I go look in the directory I told it to put it in, there's all those files. And it just kind of roughs it in based on the name you gave it. And then Plop lets you say, like, I want this one to be kebab case, I want this one to be camel case, etc. So you just write that in your templates. So this will save tons of time for other developers and for yourself in the future. So that, we made it. That is it. Feel free to scan this. This will get you a link to this deck. I did have a few other checklist items that I skipped because I was going over on time. I probably add those in as bonus slides. So one of them was about translations, and I can't remember what the other one, there's one or two more. But yeah, does anyone have any questions? Yes?
I might have kind of an interesting case. I work at Freddie Mac. It's a pretty big company. We have a lot of different divisions that are like kind of siloed, and nobody had really had a design system. I'm on the external communications building for everybody. So we're starting to make a design system, and now we have found out that other divisions do have design systems. So it's like we all have our own design systems.
Yeah.
And we're talking about pulling them together and making one unified design system that our design team controls. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about how you would approach it.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely I think my experience at the university, I could dig in there and think of some stuff. But I guess my first question to you is, are the other ones design systems, or are they more like component libraries? Where
There's a little bit of both.
Okay.
A couple of the divisions use Angular to build applications. So like one of them has just a component library. Another one actually has built a design system, and they are using Figma, and they're trying to create components that other people can use. But like their style doesn't match our external communication style. So we're like trying to figure out, how can we bring all of these?
Yeah.
Your words, Thunderdome.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think probably start by like meeting and just seeing where your commonalities are, and like just kind of get a feel. Like some people are really like they really own their stuff, and other people are willing to collaborate. So you kind of got to feel that out a little bit. But if you end up doing some sort of like grouping or cohort, I guess, I would set up some governance guidelines right up front, like who owns what is the scope of this. I would probably start there, but feel free to reach out to me in the future if you have any other questions.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Yes.
I was going to ask you about light mode, dark mode.
Mm-hmm.
So the mechanism is basically setting some sort of attribute, like at the top level of the document, or like JavaScript.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I was trying to figure this out earlier this week, and I couldn't figure it out. But the question I had was, in your style guide to the style dictionary, how do you specify, since the output are, as one is a file for light mode and one's a file for dark mode, and the tokens the custom properties are identical.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So how do you write those numbers in style dictionary in your source?
There's two separate styles. So I have each
separate files?
Two separate files, and so when they get compiled in Style Dictionary, it strips out. Oh, so there's two separate files, and they in their JSON string for each, or the JSON object for each, there's a light mode token or attribute, and then there's a dark mode property, I guess is the word, a light mode. And then on the ones on the dark sheet, which is named the same thing, it just says dark in the name, and that has the dark mode in there. And then the script from Style Dictionary that compiles it throws them into two separate sheets. Any other questions? No?
So for the storybook, does the Drupal, have you seen because since Storybook's in JavaScript and Drupal Twig is PHP, have you found a good way to work with those, specifically SDC?
Not with SDC, because I haven't really done Drupal in a couple years. I've mostly been living in React world. I've just kind of been dipping my toe back into Drupal, so I haven't done any SDC sites yet. But the Twig, there's a JavaScript version of Twig that works really well in Storybook, and there's some plugins that you can get YAML to work really well in Storybook as well. But not SDC specific, personally. Anything else?
You done much work with like print design people and how to interface with them?
Earlier in my career, I was one of them, not recently. But I actually did just print out stuff from Figma for the first time for some of the signage around here and stuff. It's very weird. I'm used to like PageMaker or InDesign or something for that. So did you have, is it something specific or?
No, I was just, we have a design group who kind of primarily does print, but they want to like change how we do web as well, and we're having some linguistic difficulties.
Oh, okay.
I would assume that like most of the styles would be pretty easy to transfer. The hard part would be the colors because of the way inks versus display.
Yeah, it's it's a little bit like we like to do a lot of testing, A/B testing around changes. So like there's some part of the staff they want to like just implement. Here's these colors. These changes.
Oh yeah.
We spent a lot of time testing these pages and like inserting a whole different color scheme.
That's a nightmare. I don't want to air my dirty laundry out here, but I'm dealing with some of this as well. For a more technical question, I guess, or is if they're using Adobe, I think you can export things to Adobe libraries. You might be able to do that out of Style Dictionary. I'm not positive.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a hard one. Let me know if you figure that out.
I'll do this for the presentation.
Okay. All right. We all good? All right. Thank you, everyone.